India has moved to amend its double taxation avoidance agreement with Mauritius by including a principal purpose test, or PPT, in the bilateral treaty. The PPT will determine if third country resident investors based out of Mauritius have a genuine case to get capital gains tax benefits on the investments that they're making in India. Market and tax circles, of course, all through late last week were abuzz with the debate on whether this amendment will impact investments that were originally grandfathered by the May 2016 amendment to the treaty. I caught up with Ashok Vadva, Group CEO, Ambit Private Limited, as part of our special offering Market Cafe to get his take on this interpretation of the latest amendment and the potential impact if indeed it applies to pre-April 17 investments. FPI is coming from Mauritius, the tax treaty is getting amended. And now I never thought I'd hear this whole conversation about grandfathered investments, whether there'll be tax or not. What do you make of what suddenly happened?
Well, déjà vu. In some ways, India is an interesting place because we don't let anything sleep forever. We have the ability to wake up issues. The changes that are being suggested through this preamble that the government of India is signing with Mauritius is actually an age-old accepted global principle, right? When treaties were first signed, which are bilateral in nature, there was a clear understanding that treaties would be created for the benefit of residents and permanent residents of respective countries. Over a period of time, we've heard different terms called treaty abuse, treaty shopping, and governments across the globe have tried to introduce legislation to ensure that the treaty benefits are actually available to those for whom they were genuinely meant to begin with. This particular legislation is nothing else other than kind of creating a level field between the OECD model, the historical OECD model, which always has a clause called limitation of benefits. Limitation of benefits is exactly what our current PPT says, which is basically what is the principal reason for which you have created a company in Mauritius. My own view is that it's par for the course. The only challenge which I heard today as a debate on your own television was on whether it has the ability to be retroactive in nature. Again, my two bit on that is that when Mr. Jaitley introduced the 2016 budget and changed the Mauritius tax benefit, particularly on capital gains, I believe, and this is only my recollection at this point of time, I don't have the print in front of me, but I believe there was a clause or a clarification that was provided with the budget, which suggested that the 2017 and the 2019 amendments, bringing down the tax concession first to 50% and then to zero, literally, were related to investments made after that date. And should that be true, and should there be that clarification somewhere in the budget books, I think it should provide adequate evidence to say that even the preamble cannot be retroactive in nature, and that it should really only apply to investment made from the day the two countries have exchanged the notes and agreed to implement the new treaty.
Because the view that suddenly one is hearing from New Delhi is that it's not retrospective. Tax is levied at the time of sale when you're exiting that investment. And if you're going to exit an old investment after this amendment comes into effect, then perhaps there is a case to apply this principal purpose test.
It is, but if you look at the definition of retrospective, and that has been tested in India on several tax occasions, Vodafone being perhaps the most widely known one, it is always related to what was the legislation when I made the first principal decision. In this case, the first principal decision of making the investment. If the law on that day permitted me a particular concession, any withdrawal of that by a subsequent legislation is deemed to be retrospective in nature. So yes, I'm sure the revenue authorities will want to maximize tax collection and say that the transaction date becomes the date on which we have to read the legislation. Whereas those who have suffering or those who made the investment prior to 2017 or before this change came in, will always argue to say that anything which applies differently from the date I made the principal decision is retroactive in nature.
Hypothetical question, because the last word hasn't been said on this till we see the effective change, the amendment and the actual notification. But hypothetically, if this were to open up previous year's investment, pre-2017 investments, for potential scrutiny, how damaging would it be? And in what way?
Well, it'll certainly be damaging from a credibility perspective. because that's the one voice which has been very loud in global commercial markets to say that is India going to change its legislation retroactively to hurt decisions made at the previous time? So I think it will only give further emphasis to the fact that, retroactive changes can be made, which is not great for confidence when people are making these investments. And at a time when we are seeing so much interest and so much economic activity coming to India, perhaps not worthwhile.